Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I just want to begin by acknowledging that my gratitude of the opportunity to meet on the Treaty 13 lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and to reaffirm the Ontario Green Party's commitment to the truth and reconciliation process. Since the Ford government was elected in 2018, everything in Ontario seems to be getting worse. Everywhere we look, people are declaring a crisis. Housing affordability, public health care, mental health services, and of course, the climate. The list goes on and on. Ontario nurses are grossly underpaid, the lowest in the country, creating a staffing crisis in our healthcare system. Emergency room wait times are at their longest list ever. Homeless shelters overflowing and people living unhoused on our streets. A handful of wealthy land speculators have been given access to Ontario's Greenbelt, while the housing affordability crisis only grows worse. And despite the increase in the severity and frequency of extreme climate-fueled weather events, the Ontario government has no plan to address the climate emergency. So there's no question that everything is not okay in Ontario. And Doug Ford's refusal to invest in public services isn't just a moral issue, it's bad fiscal policy. The cost of inaction on these systemic issues is costing all of us. Poverty costs this province $33 billion a year. Climate-fueled extreme weather events are going to damage our public infrastructure at a cost of $26.2 billion this decade alone. Instead of taking the leadership Ontarians desperately need, the government is wasting our money on super sprawl highways that pave over our greenbelt and our farmland. They're ramping up expensive, polluting fossil gas plants, and they're directing $6 billion of electricity subsidies that primarily and mostly benefit the wealthiest households. So the Ontario Greens have a different vision for this province and for the provincial budget, which will be delivered on Thursday. First, we're calling for addressing people's affordability and economic concerns by taking action on the climate crisis. We can help people save money by saving energy and creating thousands of jobs, retrofitting homes across and buildings across the province, investing in Ontario being a global leader in the manufacturing and installation of heat pumps. We could be investing in low-cost renewable energy instead of high-cost, dirty gas plants. And of course, we can be rolling out a mining to manufacturing electric vehicle strategy that's done in a way that protects our natural environment. Second, we are calling on the government to invest in building homes that people can afford in affordable, connected communities where they want to live. Ever since the provincial and federal governments got out of investing in nonprofit and co-op and social housing in the 1990s, the affordability crisis has been getting worse. We want to see real action in this budget with a commitment to making the investments to build 160 deeply affordable homes, including permanent supportive homes, over the next decade. Third, let's end legislated poverty in Ontario by doubling ODSP and OW rates, bringing people up to the low-income cutoff level, and ending the human cost and the financial cost of legislated poverty in Ontario. Fourth, let's repair and strengthen our public health care system by investing in the people who care for our loved ones. Let's make the investments so that nurses and frontline healthcare workers have fair wages, fair benefits, and better working conditions in our publicly funded, publicly delivered healthcare system. Finally, let's invest in community-based mental health services. Mental health service providers are calling for an 8% increase in their base budget funding, which has been mostly frozen over the last number of years. They simply cannot keep up for the demand and the need for mental health services without adequate operational and base funding. Far too many Ontarians are waiting far too long to access mental health services, and even when they're able to access them, not everyone can afford them. We can do better. We must do better. The Ontario Greens will continue leading on these 5 key priorities, and we'll be looking for government action on them in Thursday's budget. I'm happy to take any questions.
Mike, I'm wondering, just for starters, what sort of opportunity you've had to give input to the finance minister ahead of the budget, whether it be formally or informally through sort of any conversations you've had, if you can explain.
Yeah, so we regularly put out media releases, obviously take advantage of opportunities in the hallway or in the chamber to share with government what our budget priorities are, and we'll continue to do that.
Is there anything, whether that you've heard or read or gotten from the government that indicates what's going to be in the budget that you're sort of looking forward to hearing about as a good thing?
Yeah, you know what? I'm not going to be able to comment on the budget, obviously, until it's released on Thursday. And once we have had an opportunity to see what's in the budget and analyze, we'll be commenting on it. But I think it's important. And, I heard the finance minister in media interviews say that, the government listens to everyone. And so we're going to continue to advocate for these 5 priority areas. We've been doing that for a long time now. We'll continue to do that because we believe the opposition has an important role to play in Ontario politics in putting forward ideas and solutions that give voice to the people of this province.
The report that came from the UN's main climate change body, I think it was yesterday. Obviously very worrying. Do you have any sense that this will sort of kick the tires for this government in terms of taking sort of climate action more seriously?
Yeah, I would say yesterday's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report was terrifying, frankly. And, it's hard not to overstate the dire state that we're in globally and how it affects people's day-to-day lives here in Ontario. I mean, people are already experiencing it with food inflation, with just, the destruction to communities through flooding and extreme weather events like the derecho that went through eastern Ontario. And so, my hope is that this government is going to wake up and finally deliver a plan to tackle the climate crisis. I mean, the Auditor General's office over and over again has indicated that the government really doesn't have a plan, and Ontario is not going to meet our climate commitments. And that has grave consequences for people's health, our lives, livelihood, and property, and our economy. And so we're going to be continuing to push for climate solutions that make life more affordable for people and that enables Ontario's economy to create jobs and prosperity.
Yesterday I wrote about a posting on the environmental registry that was essentially an update to the government's plans to change how the most complex environmental assessments work. They want to shorten the time that these take, basically cut it in half, and make these more efficient. The Auditor General, I think in 2016, identified the assessment system as a whole as outdated and noted numerous issues with it. There are not specific proposals from the government yet. They are promising these by the end of this year when consultation will happen. What do you want to see in terms of how this system can be improved?
Well, I just think it's risky and reckless for the government to fast track the environmental assessment on very complex environmental issues that have major impacts on people's lives, livelihoods, our communities, and our environment. And so certainly opportunities to make the process more efficient without compromising the assessment process is vital. The challenge we've had with this government is since it's been elected, it's been systematically dismantling environmental protections in Ontario, which puts us all at risk, and even a more elevated risk given the increased frequency and severity of climate-fueled extreme weather events. I mean, according to the Financial Accountability Officer, just this decade alone, just to public infrastructure, we're looking at additional cost of $26.2 billion a year. So if the government is going to weaken the environmental assessment process, which it's already done, so if it's going to continue along this path, it's only going to elevate the risks that people face financially and to our lives, livelihoods, and property. I mean, let's just look at when Hurricane Hazel hit Ontario in 1954. 81 people died and thousands of people lost their homes, hundreds of millions of dollars of damage to the province. And one of the responses was to strengthen environmental protections. So those types of events, which we know now are increasing in frequency and severity, don't do such significant damage to people and property. And so for the government to dismantle those protections, which is what they've been doing over the last 5 years, is risky, reckless, and irresponsible.
And last thing for me is just, is there a single most line item that you're sort of hoping to see in that budget on Thursday?
Yeah, I think obviously there are 5 key priorities we have, but I think given the severity of the challenge of the climate emergency that we're facing, we need to see a government that's actually going to start investing in both climate action to help reduce pollution in a way that makes life affordable for people, and in preparing our infrastructure to withstand the impacts of the climate crisis. We simply can't have these storms, for example, knocking out power lines for people for weeks and weeks for thousands of people. And so we're going to have to make the investments in making our communities climate ready. And that's one thing I'm going to be looking for in this budget.
That's all from me.
Great. Thanks. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.